Hello and welcome to CWBLive Conversations. This is another edition with one of our great coaches that we've been excited to bring to you. Marvin Karon is here. Marvin, you have been around the industry a really long time. This is something that
Thanks,
is
Chris. Digging me here.
I mean, from an experience perspective, this is really in your blood. You're one of those rare coaches, I think, that we've been able to bring in that has got the experience that you do.
I
And
might be the oldest, yeah.
well, and I mean that really in a complimentary way, my friend. Not at all, but I think in this day and age, especially virtually, there's a lot of brand new coaches coming into the market space, and you've been a veteran of this business for a really long time, and you're still out there. You're a working actor, and what I think is so great about what you're offering is that you want to work with actors and coach and do what you love so much, and at the same time, you're out there doing it. When did you make that transition into coaching? I know you love acting. Why
Yeah,
coach?
I graduated from the National Theatre School of Canada in the late '70s,
Yeah.
and then I did the acting thing with out of Toronto. Spent 4 years in LA and spent 10 days in Kit with the Hoff doing an episode of Knight Rider. So I spent 4 years down there. And I came
Amazing.
back. Yeah. And it's still, I mean, I still get like, there's like fan mail on that saying, oh, I watched the episode and they're asking me questions.
That's
Like
amazing.
William Shatner in the Saturday Night Live episode where he's doing, he's doing the Star Trek. I don't know. That was so long ago. Anyway, I came back to Canada and then the acting career started to sputter a bit. So I went back to school and I got my teaching degree at U of T, Faculty of Education there. And I loved teaching so much that I went on and got a master's degree, and I was going to go for the doctorate. I took a long-term occasional position at a school in North York, and R.H. Thompson, who is a good friend of mine, came in, and we just noodled around like two actors do. And we came up with something called Shakespeareans, which is a 25-year-old charitable nonprofit organization that goes into schools all over the country and the UK, and we've been to the Middle East and the States with it, demystifying Shakespeare for kids. But at about that same time, I'd been taking classes out of Equity Showcase Theatre. And I said, I've got my teaching certification and I seem to get along pretty well with kids. And could I interest you in an on-camera class for teens? And so that started in 1998. And I worked out of there for a while. And some of my very first students, this was when Degrassi, The Next Generation, was huge. And one of my first clients was Drake. He was one of the first guys
Wow.
who came by, yeah. And I got a couple of lovely testimonials from him as well, which I still have in my files. And sometimes when I used to get into schools towards the end of my supply teaching career, and if kids were out of line, I would bring in the Drake testimonials and
Oh, cool,
show
man.
them, if you're good, if you do your work, I'll show you the Drake testimonials. Anyway, I started with the teens, and then a few years after that, I branched out into adults, and now I do both. And so I've been doing that I've been teaching in addition to the acting career. I've been doing that for about 23, 24, 25 years.
Do you find that in the span of time that you've been able to watch, certainly what's going on behind the camera has changed and evolved from a technology perspective? Has the craft of acting changed all that much in your mind, Marvin?
Great question, Christopher, and absolutely. And some of my students will tell you that I tell them this classic story that I think we've all seen Casablanca, and there's that there's Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman in the back of the cab, and they've got those fake flats behind them. And they're clearly in a Hollywood studio, but I'm not sure whether our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents really bought that, but
It didn't matter.
it didn't matter. They would buy that. Well, today, if God forbid they decided they wanted to remake Casablanca, they wouldn't do it in a studio with backdrops. They would fly to Paris, and that scene would take place right near the Eiffel Tower, and so on and so forth. And I think it's the same with acting. Audiences' tastes have become more sophisticated, and I think that acting is all about honesty and truth and believability. And so you've got to be, one of the things she experienced does, we also run a summer program. And I remember I was exhausted, so I flipped on the TV and I was watching some dreadful Steve Reeve film, Hercules from the 50s on some movie network and stuff. And the acting was just awful. And even a 16, 15, 10, 12-year-old kid today is just not going to buy that. So the acting, yes, like the technology. Well, Star Wars, 1977, right? We look at that now. I mean, I don't want to date you, but I mean, I remember when
no, of course, I remember too. Yeah.
And we thought, oh my God, state of the art. You look at it now, it's dated.
Changed.
It's in technology,
We
both in terms of the hardware and in terms of the acting. I think it's changed and it's become way more sophisticated, and you got to be way more on your game, I think.
Are we looking for actors now something, is the style du jour, Marvin, about convincingly authentic realism? I feel like so much of the writing, the great writing we're seeing around even TV right now, from HBO, from Showtime, we're seeing very gritty and raw kinds of dramas, and actors, I think, are being put into very realistic and modernized situations. And I wonder, in the actors you work with and you teach, is it harder to teach an actor to really be authentic and real? Is it easier for them to instead act outside the realm of belief and more fantastical stories? Does that question make sense, Joe? I'm curious how you help actors manage today's requirement to convince today's audience.
Yeah, again, Laurence Olivier, we'll call the greatest actor of the 20th century. He says that, what we're looking for as actors is to deliver a truth of some sort. And I'm not sure, I think acting for the camera really falls somewhere between, on the way, say, right or left-hand side of the spectrum, you've got Japanese no theater, it's all stylized and stuff, and that's not what acting for the camera is about. And I think it's kind of a mistake as well to look at acting as realism, because I don't think it's realism. I think what we've got to find as actors is acting in a style that somehow balances almost perfectly the stylized and the realistic, and comes like in a perfect balance somewhere at the exact midpoint between those two extremes. Because if you're too realistic, then you run the risk of being a little dull, because real life is kind of dull very often, and we don't want that when we're watching film or television. We want a story to tell us something about ourselves, and so I think it's a question of finding the balance. So it's finding truth in, I think it's taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary
Well
somehow.
said. Well
and
said.
That, I think, is what acting for the camera wants to be about.
Marvin, tell me about what it's like to be in a session with you. What should actors who are looking to book a session expect? Are you collaborative? Are you hard-nosed, gritty, tough? Are you more nurturing and supportive? What's your style of coaching?
Well, it depends. I've got a range of lesson plans. Lesson planning is something I learned when I went to the Faculty of Education. So I might be a little too structured in a sense, but it varies. Sometimes what I offer is audition. You've got an audition, And so it's very, very uber, hyper, ultra specific. We are trying to get you that rule. Sometimes it might be an open-ended thing. And so what we might do in that situation is we might, we might go through a series, 6, 8, 10 sessions where I give, and I think, as every good acting coach does, I get my share of testimonials. And I'm proudest when I get those testimonials that say, thank you for being so detailed and specific with your input. So what I do is I've got, over the 23 years I've been teaching, through reading and trial and error and what works for me, I've come up with a little package of what I call ideas or enchiladas or whatever, or Marvins or whatever you want to call them. and I kind of dole those out. And then for people, for the most part, working with me for the first time, what we'll do is just before I came on with you, I was transcribing yet another bunch of scenes. I'm constantly watching movies and TV series for scenes to use with my students. And what we'll do is we will look at a scene and we'll figure out what worked and why. And how do we go back to that well again and again and again? What didn't work and why? And how do we avoid doing that again in the future? And that might be another way of working with somebody. And then another possibility, and this is just the last one, and
there you go.
Yeah, there's a million of them, but another one might be, look, okay, you've worked with me for a while. You've got my terminology down. You know what I think acting is all about. And so let's do something that on sets you are never really allowed to do. Let's play. Out here, I attend the ACTRA PD days quite faithfully. And Matthew, I can't remember his last name. He's on Rookie Blue. He's the grizzled old veteran on Rookie Blue, and he was being interviewed, and he said, directors talking to actors, that's like plumbers talking to electricians, right? So, so like I make it quite clear, you don't want to be on a set and say, can we just play that? Because there's no time for that.
Sure.
But for the actor to know that they've got that resource, that tool to go to. And again, that's for people who have worked with me for a while. So we jump into something like that. So I've got
the range, and it sounds too like, Marvin, you are open to actors of all kinds of levels of experience.
Oh, absolutely. I deal with people who are just starting, and I've dealt with some folks who have more experience. So yeah, the whole gamut, absolutely.
Marvin, you've got an incredible resume of background, and everyone can read more about it here on your profile page. They can check out the different sessions you're offering, and we're so honored to have you part of the CWBLive coaching family. I think what you bring from your background and what you bring to your passion for the craft, there's a lot of people now who will be able to work with you virtually that probably never would have been able to before. And I'm so looking forward to hearing how that goes for you. Final thought to you, Marvin, how would you advise an actor right now who's thinking about making that breakthrough into virtual coaching? They've probably done some workshops in a group or maybe even some one-on-one sessions, but maybe it's their first time going into the virtual environment. Maybe they're a little bit reluctant. What would you say to actors like that and working with you?
Great question, Christopher. Look, newsflash, not. The world has changed dramatically, right? And even after the COVID-19 pandemic is over, and I don't think it's going to be over for a while, but even when it is over, this is going to be something that's going to be a part of our way of doing business going forward in future. I have done 2 online auditions now via Zoom. And I think that producers, casting directors, who, like even in Toronto, I'm talking to you from Hamilton, I moved here a couple of years ago, but even in Toronto, I lived up in North York, so it took me like 45 minutes to get to central casting at DuPont and Ossington, and producers and directors thinking, wait a minute, I don't have to, I can just with my own home. Nothing will replace the in-studio experience, and that will come back
Sure.
when the pandemic is over. But it's not an either or proposition. I think we can do both, and I think we can take advantage of both. In addition to my teaching here in Toronto, I also teach overseas. 18 years ago, I was invited to teach out of the Actors Centre, the professional development wing of the British Actors Union. And in late March, I was going to run a camera in a studio, jigsaw casting in downtown Toronto. And I got a number of phone calls saying, you're not still running a class in a studio. Right? I said, no, I'm not. Well, how would you consider running one online? And it was the first thing from,
There you go, right.
I'm not terribly adept, but I didn't want to just sit and do nothing. So I did it. And I've got students from London, England, from, veterans of the Actors Centre, people that they've referred to me. They're patching in at 7 o'clock at their time, 2 o'clock our time, and they're connecting and they are learning how, from the Canadian.
Really globalizing it, isn't it?
And I think, it's a tool, and we've got to use it. And God bless a casting workbook for putting this together, because I spent, I don't know how many hundreds of hours, trying to get clients one at a time. And you've got this whole wonderful, and you're way more adept technology than I am to get the word out in a much more efficient way than I am. And let's share. It's like, talk about, a small world we can all learn and experience and share with one another. As I say, first opportunity I get,
let's do it.
Back in the classroom, but I will never not be offering coaching sessions online either. And again, I think less so now, but there was all that news about how the environment was getting healthier and healthier because people were driving less. So there's all of that to consider. There's an upside and a downside to everything, including this. There is a downside to working this way, but there's a huge upside. And I'm just delighted to be part of the Casting Workbooks initiative.
We're so glad to have you, Marvin, and thank you so much for being a part of it. And we're going to encourage you again, take a look at Marvin's profile page and book a session with him, book a consultation to get to know him better and talk about where you can play and work and really develop your craft. Marvin, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you real soon, okay?
Thank you.